Have you ever heard of a man who believed his heart was shrinking, that his blood was turning to dust, and that the only way to survive was to drink the blood of others? It sounds like a horror movie, but this was terrifyingly real. This was the story of Richard Trenton Chase, the man who would become known as the Vampire of Sacramento. Our story begins in sunny California, 1950. Richard Chase was born into what seemed like a typical suburban family, but behind closed doors, it was a war zone of constant fighting, shouting, and violence. His father was controlling and abusive. His mother struggled with her own deep-seated paranoia, and little Richard, he grew up scared, utterly alone, and filled with a silent, simmering anger. As a child, Richard began showing some truly dark signs, killing small animals, lighting fires, and wetting the bed well into his teens. Psychologists now call this the McDonald Triad, a set of early indicators that often point to violent behavior later in life. But back then, nobody took it seriously. Nobody saw the monster that was beginning to form. By the time he was in high school, Richard's behavior had spiraled into something far stranger. He was thin, pale, and completely withdrawn from everyone around him. He developed an obsession with his health, becoming convinced that his body was shutting down. He'd tell classmates that his heart would sometimes just stop beating, or that his blood was literally evaporating into dust. He was losing his grip on reality, and the descent was just beginning. In his early 20s, Chase's disturbing delusions turned dangerous. He became fixated on blood, believing it contained a vital life energy, and that drinking it was the only way to heal his failing body. He started small, killing rabbits, cats, and dogs, cutting them open and drinking their blood. Neighbors would find the drained bodies of animals in their yards. At night, Richard would roam the streets, a gaunt shadow searching for strays to feed on. He was slowly transforming into something that was no longer human. Then, in 1975, he was found in Nevada, his clothes and car covered in blood. Inside his vehicle were buckets filled with animal organs. When questioned by police, he calmly explained, "It's just cow blood. I needed it for medicine." He was committed to a mental institution, where the staff witnessed just how far gone he truly was. He would catch birds from his window, snap their necks, and smear their blood all over his body. Other patients gave him a chilling nickname, Dracula. But the system, tragically, failed. After just a short stay, doctors declared him no longer a danger to society and released him back into the world. Back in Sacramento, Richard moved into a filthy apartment that became a reflection of his own twisted mind. The smell of death hung heavy in the air. Rotten meat, blood-stained cups, and animal carcasses were scattered everywhere. He developed a strange belief that people could only enter his home if the door was unlocked. Otherwise, they weren't truly invited. This bizarre idea would soon guide his horrific killing spree. He stopped taking his medication, and his hallucinations grew worse. He became convinced that someone was stealing his blood and that he had to kill to get it back. On December 29, 1977, the first human domino fell. 51-year-old Ambrose Griffin was helping his wife unload groceries when he suddenly collapsed. He had been shot from a passing car, a completely random, senseless act. The police had no leads, no motive, and no suspect. It seemed like a meaningless tragedy. But for Richard Chase, it was just the beginning. He had finally crossed the line. Just a few weeks later, on January 23, 1978, Chase walked through a quiet Sacramento suburb, testing door after door until he found one that was unlocked. For him, this was an invitation. The home belonged to Teresa Wallen, who was 22 years old and pregnant. As she opened her front door to take out the trash, Chase forced his way inside. He shot her 3 times, and then he began to mutilate her body. Using a kitchen knife, he collected her blood and drank it. This was no longer a man driven by delusion. This was something else entirely. 4 days later, Chase broke into another unlocked home. Inside were Evelyn Miroth, her 6-year-old son Jason, her infant nephew David, and a family friend, Dan Meredith. Neighbors heard what they thought were fireworks. When police finally entered the house later that day, the scene they discovered was beyond horrifying. All four were dead, brutally mutilated. Blood covered the walls and floors. It looked like a scene ripped straight from a nightmare. Amidst the chaos, a bloody handprint and footprints gave police their first real clues. They now realized they were hunting one of the most disturbing murderers in American history. Sacramento was plunged into a state of panic. People triple-locked their doors. Parents kept their children inside. No one felt safe. Detectives worked around the clock, piecing together the terrifying puzzle. At the second crime scene, they found clear fingerprints and one crucial clue. A victim had recently bought groceries from a store where a strange, disheveled man had been seen acting suspiciously. That man was Richard Chase. When police arrived at his apartment, the horror hit them before they even opened the door. The smell was overwhelming. Inside was a vision of pure chaos. Animal remains, blood-stained walls, human body parts stored in containers, and a blender filled with a thick red liquid. It was like stepping directly into the mind of madness. Chase was arrested without a fight. He looked calm, almost relieved that it was over. During questioning, Chase explained his twisted logic. He said that Nazis and UFOs were controlling him, poisoning him through the soap he used. He claimed he had to drink blood to protect himself and stay alive. Doctors diagnosed him as a paranoid schizophrenic, lost in a world of delusion. But prosecutors argued that he knew exactly what he was doing. He planned his crimes. He specifically targeted homes with unlocked doors, and he tried to cover his tracks. In 1979, a jury agreed. Richard Chase was found guilty of 6 counts of murder and sentenced to die in the gas chamber, but he never made it to his execution. In December of 1980, guards found Chase dead in his cell. He had hoarded his antidepressant pills and overdosed, a quiet, lonely end to a life defined by madness and terror. He was just 30 years old. Even today, the people of Sacramento remember those months of fear. For years, parents told their children to always lock the doors, not because of some mythical boogeyman, but because of the vampire. The case of Richard Chase became a terrifying symbol of how untreated mental illness, isolation, and delusion can twist a human being into something monstrous. He believed he needed blood to live. But his story serves as a chilling reminder that when we ignore the cries for help from the mentally ill, the consequences can be catastrophic, not just for one person, but for everyone around them. And that was the true terrifying story of the Vampire of Sacramento. A man who completely erased the line between human and monster. If you found this story as chilling as we did, make sure to subscribe to Dark Truth Files, where we uncover the world's darkest minds and the crimes they tried to hide. Don't forget to like, share, and turn on notifications, because our next story will take you even deeper into the shadows.